Right, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the Cabinet of Staffordshire County Council today, Wednesday, the 16th of November. First item on the agenda is apologies for absence. Mr. Bradbury, please.
Good morning, Leader. I'm not in receipt of any apologies for this morning.
I've had apologies from Councillor Williams, Councillor Jessel and Dr. Harling. Any other apologies? No. Item number 2 on the agenda is declarations of interest in accordance with Standing Order 16. Are there any declarations of interest? For the record, there are none. Third item on the agenda is the decision notice of the meeting held on the 19th of October 2022. Is it your wish that I sign it as a correct record of that meeting?
Agreed.
That is moved. Item number 4 is the leaders' update. Colleagues, while leaders discussed the need for global action on climate change at the COP27 summit in Egypt this week, I'm pleased to see a report on our agenda today showing the significant strides we are making here in Staffordshire. Our annual report shows the progress the County Council is making towards its net zero target. But we make up a very small proportion of Staffordshire's total emissions, so it's even more important that we inform, inspire and support residents, communities and businesses to do their bit. If everyone makes a few small changes, the impact quickly mounts. So look out for the grants and other schemes we make available to accelerate the county's journey to net zero. The National Memorial Arboretum was once again the focus of both local and national Remembrance Day events on Friday. The 11th of November is such an important opportunity to reflect, remember and thank those in the armed services who have made or continue to make enormous sacrifices for the county. And I know that many county councillors, district councillors and parish councillors around the county were involved in wreath-laying ceremonies across the county, and I thank them for their contribution and the recognition that they are making to those who have fallen in the service of our country. For some veterans, the transition to civilian life is a hard one, and they fall on difficult times, or have health problems resulting from their service. Our Here to Help campaign is connecting people, including those who have or serve in our armed forces, with the huge range of support available in Staffordshire from charities including the Royal British Legion and SAFA. This week we launched a new community recovery fund inviting bids for grants of up to £5,000 from voluntary and community groups working with those affected by the cost of living. And promotion is underway once again for the free holiday activities and food programme. Over the Christmas period, eligible school children will be able to attend free holiday clubs and enjoy a healthy meal. Like households, many businesses, large and small, are feeling the pinch of rising costs and customers with less money in their pocket. Small businesses in particular are the lifeblood of Staffordshire's economy and employ tens of thousands of people. We are urging people in Staffordshire to support their local businesses, especially in the run-up to Christmas. Look out for more information ahead of Small Business Saturday in early December. And I know that many districts and boroughs hold Christmas markets, and it's fantastic to see people out there in those Christmas markets supporting those retailers, those small retailers, as they endeavour to make a bit of a profit on the run-up to Christmas. Winter is on the way, and it's the time of year when cold and wet weather damages our roads and also makes repair work a lot more challenging. So it's great to hear that we are trialling a new thermal road repair machine that heats the road and reuses existing tarmac. Who knew? Our road maintenance does continue throughout the winter months, but this often depends on the temperature and weather conditions. By heating up the road and this patching machine allows us to fix defects in some of the coldest conditions, even up in the moorlands. If this trial is successful, this has the potential to help us step up our winter maintenance programme and fix more defects throughout the season, which will be excellent. During 2022, the UK has seen continuing increases in the cases of avian flu in our bird population. While the risk to public health is very low, wild birds can spread the virus to poultry and other captive birds, and we have seen cases locally. All bird keepers, from farmers to households with a few hens in the garden, must keep them housed to stop the spread. And if you do see ill or dead birds, do not approach, but instead report the matter to DEFRA. You can find the details at www.gov.uk. Right, ladies and gentlemen, that concludes the Leaders' Update. The next item on the agenda, agenda item number 5, is minutes of the meeting of the Property Subcommittee held on the 2nd of October 2022. Are you content that they're an accurate reflection? Yep. Agreed. Then agenda item number 6, Staffordshire Means Back to Business Oral Update, brought to you by the Deputy Leader and Cabinet Member for Economy and Skills, Councillor White.
Thank you very much, Leader. So these updates sometimes come thick and fast, and it's only 4 weeks ago since the last update that I provided to Cabinet. So I'm not going to go over any ground that's been covered in that or recent meetings, but there are some points that I'll cover today. The first is to talk about the national picture. Colleagues will all be aware that this week it was reported that the UK economy shrank by 0.2% between July and September. Largely due to energy costs and general inflation, together with the necessary increases in interest rates that we've been seeing that will work to bring those inflationary pressures under control. Our role as a county council is not to try and insert ourselves into those national discussions, but to focus on the issues that we can work to locally, where the county council, either individually or in partnership with other public sector organisations, and crucially with businesses themselves, to better our economy and our communities, and to create the conditions for economic success in our county, which I'm pleased to say continues to be the case. We have a strong economy here in Staffordshire, and those challenges that businesses and individuals are facing are very real for our businesses and for people in our county, but we are in a good position in terms of the state of our economy, and the County Council plays its part through a large number of schemes that I've outlined at previous meetings, where we deliver relevant support to businesses and to individuals to help them with their economic activity. What I will focus on today is just one of those, a key development that's just getting underway in our county, which I think illustrates the strength of our economy and the confidence that business has in us, and indeed government. So earlier this month, I was pleased to be invited to speak at a showcase for the West Midlands Interchange, which, depending on who you ask, is either one of or the largest logistics development in the whole of Europe that's getting underway at the moment. It's a rail freight interchange, taking a lot of the freight that travels around our country off the roads and transporting it efficiently by rail. In the process, reducing the pressure on our roads and reducing the environmental impact of economic activity. It is massive. It will create 8,000 new jobs in Staffordshire, around half of which will be higher skilled, higher paid jobs, and it will create around another 8,000 to 9,000 jobs during its construction, which will last for many years. Now, this is a nationally significant piece of infrastructure. The planning permission for it was granted by central government, and it is always something that I know creates some concern locally when you see these large new developments. But the impact of this in terms of our economy is going to be huge. And what I'm pleased to say is that as the County Council, we've been able to put ourselves in a position where we've been able to positively influence the development of the plan for this site. I was particularly pleased at the event that I attended that the developer has decided that they are going to endeavour to make the site electricity neutral by covering the many acres of roof space on the site with photovoltaic panels, something which this council suggested to them. We've also secured £4.5 million of contribution from the developer for recruitment and skills development within South Staffordshire to help local people to access the jobs that are being created on the site. And the work on that is already getting underway ahead of the spades in the ground to start constructing the site early in the new year. And again, we're working very closely both with the developers but also with other public sector colleagues in terms of getting that underway. We're also working closely with the local community in terms of transport and travel plans for the site to make sure that the impact of that economic activity is minimalised. And overall, I think that it is a fantastic example of the sort of thing that this county council does, not trying to get in the way of what business is doing, but trying to support and shape it in a way that best suits our population whilst helping our economy to move forwards. Cabinet always likes to be kept up to date on claimant figures, and the figures for this month have remained largely static. So unemployment in Staffordshire, the claimant rate has remained unchanged at 2.7%, as it has remained unchanged nationally at 3.7%. So good to see that our claimant rate is considerably lower than the national average, as it has been for quite some time. Our youth claimant count saw a small increase of around 80 people. That's a trend that we're watching. It is small numbers, but there is a small trend there, which is representative of the fact that more young people are employed in hospitality and entertainment and other sectors that are being impacted by the reduced discretionary spend that people have with inflationary pressures. So we are watching that and we're working to try and address that. But overall, the picture in Staffordshire remains strong, and key schemes such as the West Midlands Interchange demonstrate that confidence from business, but also the competence and the care of this authority in terms of making sure that we're supporting those activities, but doing it in a way that benefits local people whilst our economy grows. Thank you, Leader.
Councillor DeVille.
Leader, thank you. I'm delighted to hear the Deputy Leader say that the Staffordshire economy is remaining strong. That's notwithstanding the challenges that we face and the ongoing challenges that we will face in the future. Delighted, Councillor White, to see yesterday the Countess of Wessex opening the brand new, all-purpose cab manufacturing facility at JCB. Tremendous facility. I think the Countess also visited Kiel yesterday. So really positive. Lord Bamford said during the opening yesterday that Staffordshire, Great Britain and Staffordshire are great places to manufacture. And of course that will provide highly skilled jobs plus apprenticeships in our area. And JCB, of course, is massively, massively positive in our local economy. So whilst we are facing challenges, small businesses, the Leader mentioned earlier that it's Small Business Day, one day in December. Small businesses face massive challenges moving forward. But as always, you know, in Staffordshire, we don't bury our heads in the sand. We get onto it. Get on with it, and we face our challenges in a positive way. And I think the opening of the cab facility in Uttoxeter yesterday is a massive boost to the Staffordshire manufacturing economy. Thank you, Leader.
Councillor Parry, then Councillor Tagg.
We do always seem to buck the trend, don't we, in terms of what's happening elsewhere. Staffordshire seems to maintain its position as a vibrant economy, lower claimant rates, higher kind of investments, and those sort of spotlight investments that we're talking about, JCB and the interchange. We're starting to see, though, nationally, and I think it's worth keeping an eye on those lagging indicators around construction, for example, that can lead to other factors in the economy. Some house builders are starting to say the build-out rates are slowing down, simply because the sales market's been affected. I wonder whether we're seeing any of that in Staffordshire. I suspect not, given those sort of construction projects that are happening, and the high level of house building that's currently going on in Staffordshire. The other question I have really is about flexibility of the workforce, and still businesses are saying that they're finding it difficult to fill vacancies, which is obviously, even though we've got to perhaps reduce demand in some areas, in some businesses that's not the case. They have increased demand, and the only way they can grow their business if they can recruit to fill those places to be able to actually achieve that. So for economic growth, you know, flexible and growing workforce is what's required. Claimant rate is one factor, but I think, you know, vacancy rate is another, isn't it? And workforce flexibility is another. So two questions there about workforce flexibility, really, and those lagging indicators and early signs.
Councillor Tagg.
Thank you, Leader. I think as the Deputy Leader pointed out, and the speakers, that we're in a very challenging time for the economy, but I think for our town centres there is a silver lining to that. I mean, in Newcastle Town Centre, for example, over 80% of the units are now occupied. That's higher than it has been for many years. We see a good, vibrant footfall as an economic centre for people to come in and shop and eat and spend their leisure time. And I think Mr DeVille mentioned the Countess of Wessex visit. She also visited, as well as Keele, our town centre and looked at a homelessness project and a rough sleeper prevention project, which again is raising that sort of a profile of our town to be somewhere you can come and enjoy, and where we if there are people with difficulties, we help them and make sure they don't sit on the streets or beg on the streets or anything like that. So I think there is an optimistic picture when it comes to the economy in Staffordshire, and I think we can, particularly, I think if the leader, Deputy Leader agrees with me, obviously the Future High Street Fund money and the Town Deal money that has been injected into towns across the county can only help that even more.
And in Lichfield District, the District Council there is creating a destination through a huge investment in a cinema, a bespoke, one of these small, it's not a multiplex, but it's a small type art type house type cinema. And clearly they express it much more succinctly than I do. Yeah, so we see our towns across the county and the city of Lichfield becoming destinations, which is continuing to attract people in. But my question to the Deputy Leader is about worklessness and those people who are over 50 choosing not to participate in the workforce, which is a segue to Councillor Parry's question, I think. And so if you could address those issues for us, Deputy Leader, I'd be grateful.
Yep. Thanks, Leader. I'll try and do that quickly. So the question around recruitment, and then the broader question around flexibility in the workforce and matching people up with the vacancies is one of the things that we've discussed in previous cabinet meetings, and I'll rehearse a bit of that in a moment. But specifically on construction, I think we are in a fortunate position here in Staffordshire that the demand for construction skills is enormous. So house building's been a big driver of that. We know that, as is the case for commercial property, for residential development, we are a lower cost location than most of our neighbours. So if you're looking to spend a slightly more limited amount of funds, whether that's as a business or as an individual, Staffordshire's a good place to come, because we are lower cost to do those things, but the quality is very high. So we are a good value place to do that in the best sense of the word. In addition to that, though, if there is any reduction in the rate of house building because of caution on the part of house builders over the next couple of years, we have projects like the West Midlands Rail Freight Interchange. I know it's not popular, but HS2, a massive driver of demand in that sector. But also, as Councillor Tagg mentioned, the fantastic investments that are coming into our town centres across the county through the Towns Deals Future High Streets Fund, and also through councils doing it themselves, like Lichfield District Council, which hasn't benefited from any of those schemes, but is getting on and making things happen with the private sector to make their town centre more vibrant and creating demand for construction jobs. So there's a lot of demand in that sector. I haven't mentioned it today because I hadn't wanted to go over the same ground that's been covered recently, but at our last cabinet meeting we were talking about the jobs brokerage scheme that we have, which is about addressing that excess of demand for workers in our economy. We have thousands more jobs, many thousands more jobs than we have people who are unemployed. And so matching those people together is incredibly important. And our jobs brokerage scheme, which matches employers who have vacancies with individuals, but crucially with skills packages. So if we think about construction as an example of that, equipping people with those skills to go and do those jobs, that's something that's quite innovative and something that it's right that we're delivering locally, and it's rolling out as we speak. We've done a lot of work in Staffordshire on becoming one of the best performing areas for making sure that we have as few as possible young people who are not in education, employment or training. And we've halved the number of those over the last decade. We're one of the best performing places in the country. Worklessness amongst older people is perhaps the new horizon on that. And there are a lot of people who've dropped out of economic activity over the last couple of years. So it is something that both we locally and as a country, we need to look at more. The jobs brokerage scheme is a good example of something that can pick those people up, hopefully, and if they need some additional skills because their skills are out of date, that can happen. The other thing I'd highlight is our adult education programme, which is high performing, and that again has a strong aim of picking up those people who are not in work at the moment and giving them the confidence to take that first step back into employment. So a really good point and something that we are active on. Hopefully I've covered all the questions.
Thank you very much. As always, a comprehensive ranging over the subject. So with that, we move on to the next item on the agenda, which is agenda item number 7, which is the Climate Change Action Plan and Climate Change Annual Report, brought to you by the Cabinet Member for Environment, Infrastructure and Climate Change, Councillor Tagg.
Thank you, Leader. Really pleased to bring, as you said, the Climate Change Annual Report 2022 and also our Climate Change Action Plan update. The headline figure is a 43% reduction in emissions since we declared a climate emergency in 2019. And this has been achieved through continuing energy efficiency across the council's corporate estate, including schools. Also, some of our schools have gone to academies, so they are no longer taken as part of the carbon count of the county council. And we're also getting to the bottom of our council emissions across the board, which has helped us to begin to trim off some of those as well, which is added to the 43% this year. And of course, there are the effects of the way we've changed working because of COVID as well, which have also aided us to get to that 43% this time. Now, that's all good and all great, and we are taking out what would be described as low-hanging fruits. And there are still many areas of the County Council's operation with high emissions, such as waste management and home-to-school transport particularly, but there are others as well. There's a lot of achievements, though, over the last year, and they're detailed on page 7 of the report onwards, and build on the sound base from last year's annual plan update. And I think it's an achievement which everybody across the council, all departments can play a part in and take the credit for. But as I say, there is still a long way to go as we're on our road to 2050. We've used our Climate Change Action Plan again this year to help local groups, schools invest in more than £53,000 in projects across the board, which has helped to bring forward schemes such as upgrading community halls with LED lights, encouraging active travel through bike racks at schools, and many other schemes which are also detailed in the report, which I think an important part of what we're trying to do is change behaviours when it comes to climate change. Because, of course, as you mentioned, Leader, right at the beginning, only 2% of the emissions come from local authorities. The other 98% are everything else that happens in the council. So that's an important point to make. We also are measuring our progress, which of course was one of the things that Scrutiny asked us last time we went to them to ensure we could have a measurable progress in the report, and that's detailed in the report, which is important to see the steps along the way to 2050 as we get to our goal to be net zero. We're also taking a leadership role through the Staffordshire Sustainability Board, which I chair as the portfolio here at the county. We're also been involved in the Expo, Staffordshire Expo conference, which brought together groups from across the county to talk about and to learn from each other on how to reduce carbon emissions. And also we've held our own conference a month or two ago now for community groups to come in and to gain advice on behavioural change from the County Council, and also how to apply to that Climate Change Action Fund which we've got. This report went to scrutiny on the way to Cabinet and was well received, and one of the recommendations we got later is that this scrutiny is recommending this report be made widely available because of the good news aspects of it, and also to reinforce that behavioural change which we're pushing through our comms for all residents across Staffordshire, so they can, as you said, Leader, able to do little things, little changes that will reduce carbon emissions and make a bigger impact overall across the county. We also have the review of our action plan today, 33 actions in our 5 key areas as we go forward. In carbon reduction, we're working with our districts and boroughs to bring together local plans on net zero ambition, which I think new builds, etc., need to be built already net zero, so they don't have to be retrofitted later. We're also working on a joint EV strategy that will come to this cabinet in January and also go to the district cabinets, and also an adaptation strategy for the retrofitting agenda, which is of course massive for those properties we've already got, particularly old Victorian terrace properties, which need a lot of work to make them energy efficient, not only saving money for the occupants but also reducing the carbon emissions as a whole. The second key action area is air quality, where we're working on our active travel plans and a buzz improvement plan as well to reduce emissions across the board there. We're also in our natural environment priority, obviously working on the nature recovery strategies across the county, and a net zero by nature policy which will involve planting trees to reduce carbon emissions. And also there is a conference which the County Council has pulled together in early December for interested parties such as the Wildlife Trust, the Farmers Union, and also our district colleagues to talk about the nature recovery strategy, and we're going to implement that across our county. The next priority is waste. What we're looking to do there is to roll out food waste across collections across the county as part of the government's requirement in the Environment Act. And also we're looking to obviously reduce the amount of waste that goes to our waste sites, and then ultimately onto the waste to energy plant as well, which will reduce carbon emissions as a whole. And lastly, a big part of it, which I've already mentioned, is the behavioural change and the comms plans attached to this. We now worked on a joint comms plan with our district colleagues to get that message out continually throughout the year on messages to reduce carbon emissions and how people can play their part in that. And of course, playing their part in that, all portfolio holders around this table and in this county council have a role to play. And also there is accountability for each area of the council to ensure we reach our goals for carbon emissions across the board. And finally, the last page of the action plan is our roadmap to net zero, which shows in an illustrated graph how we intend to get to where we want to be by 2050 in those stages of 5 years. And you will see that there is a plan. We are measuring ourselves against that plan. And as I said right at the beginning, over the past year, we've achieved a lot to reach those 43% reductions. And we're set fair to get to where we want to be in 2050, which is a net zero council. I won't move the recommendations now, but I'll open it up for comments or any report backs from Cabinet members on carbon reduction in their area.
It's wonderful to see the leadership role we're playing by leading by example, I think is the phrase I would use. Our communities in particular, and in Councillor Wilson's area, embracing the agenda, doing stuff themselves in the low carbon agenda, taking pride in their communities' litter legends, for example, making their places where you can be proud of, and taking ownership of that. I think it's absolutely wonderful, and this all plays into that, and I'm delighted to see this report and the progress that's been made. But just reminding ourselves of the fact that we haven't done anything that is, you do see some authorities going for the sort of virtue signalling approach, which is zero carbon by yesterday. Completely unachievable, extremely expensive to even try and achieve. What we're demonstrating today, again, is our incremental approach to achieving that net zero. Little steps, but successful steps, year on year, which allows us to be certain that those steps that we take will stick. That's the other important thing. You can take steps forward, but then just having to then take 2 steps backwards takes you nowhere, does it? So I've got Councillor Northcott wanting to speak, Councillor DeVille, Councillor Parry.
Thank you very much, Leader, and thank you, Councillor Tagg, for bringing this paper. I think it shouldn't be underestimated, the importance of the climate change agenda. It's here to stay. We need to tackle it. But we've been, the Staffordshire County Council, taking that active leadership role that we can take our district colleagues on the journey. I'm particularly interested in the planning aspects of this, because many councils will be looking to change their local plans, to update their local plans, or indeed start and finish local plans, as we've seen in Newcastle. It's particularly important that we embed the culture change that is needed and requirements in terms of developments that are coming forward, that very important role that the county council play in terms of organising the infrastructure at a local level will have a massive impact going forward over the years in terms of carbon reduction by more sustainable approaches to improvement and upgrading as building projects are built on board. This is really to ensure that the district councils are actually married up in terms of the two-tier working arrangements that we're putting forward, the enhanced two-tier working arrangements. I think this will go a long way to bring those colleagues on board. That some district councils have been hesitant, don't want to go overboard in terms of putting too much into their local policies, and that others may need to put more into their policies, particularly in my division and my area of Newcastle, with the local plan. We're looking at this now. We realise it's a golden thread that's going to have to go through, not just the local plan, but the whole council approach in terms of all agendas going forward. We need to have this culture change, and it needs leadership, but I agree with the comments that have been made in terms it's got to be deliverable, but embedding it and starting that little seed to grow, and I don't wish to coin the phrase of growing things too much on this, but it needs that leadership to bring that role and the district councils on board, as well as parish councils and the community at large. So I'm really enthused about this paper, and thank you very much for bringing it to the Cabinet. Thank you.
Councillor DeVille.
Yeah, it's a brilliant report, Councillor Tagg, thank you. And I'm delighted to see that we're already making considerable progress. And Mr Northcote's right. This needs to be embedded in all of the work that we do. I've said so many times that this needs to become part of our day job, and I think it has. I think it is part of our day job. Really importantly, Mr Tagg, is the management and the maintenance of our council estate, which is massive. So just, colleagues, to give you some idea of how serious we treat this, and this has just got to work. There's no option B. This has got to work. It is achievable, Leader, you're right. I think it's sensible, it's achievable, and we're measuring progress very well. Just to give you some sense of how urgent, the urgency we place on this, in our estate, particularly energy efficiency with lighting. Just to give you some idea, the lighting across the whole of our estate, 60% of it is LEDs. Another 30% is low energy lighting. So we've still got a bit to do, but we really, really take this seriously. Great report, Councillor Tagg. I think we'll show no complacency whatsoever in moving ahead and meeting our targets. And I'm delighted that we are showing progress, and I'm even more delighted that we are monitoring and measuring our progress so closely. Fully welcome this report, Chairman.
Councillor Parry and Councillor Wilson.
Thank you. Yeah, it's really pleasing to see this report this morning, and I think we're also quite fortunate that we've got Simon Tagg who's leading on this side, because Simon is a terrific advocate and champion of these issues. And it ensures that it's embedded within our thinking at every opportunity. So this isn't something that we pigeonhole and box and say, over to you, Simon, then we can all forget about it. Simon continuously reminds us that it's everybody's role in this, and we all have a stake in this. We all have an obligation here. Also reminded of how complex and challenging this is, and particularly what we're talking about here, really two things. One is the carbon reduction of the county council's operations and activities, which in itself is quite complicated, to try and ring fence that, to see, you know, how far does that spread, how far can we capture and be responsible for that carbon reduction. And secondly, how can we take a leadership role, as the leader of the council's already said, how can we take a leadership role in encouraging good practice elsewhere? So if we're a business operation with a site, we would be able to kind of ring fence that site, work out what's coming in and out of it, and work out what our carbon footprint is and take steps to reduce it. An organisation that's complex as this, with all sorts of operations, whether they be mobile, whether they be static, whether they be buildings, etc., is a very much more complex challenge for us to actually say, well, actually, where are our responsibilities here? Where is our operational carbon footprint, and how do we measure that? If you look at the graph on which is really useful, because the first thing you think about, for me anyway, is, okay, how do we measure this? Great stuff, but how do we measure this? And it really says to you that this is not easy. We are, in a sense, taking pretty solid, but at the end of the day, fairly approximate measures of this and seeing that reduce. But I think that's acceptable. For as long as you've got some measurement that's showing decline, it's probably representative of the whole, isn't it? It's probably, that's good enough, because I don't think we could get to the level of science in this that is affordable and that is necessary. But we've got some measurement in there, which is the important thing. People can therefore hold us to account as a cabinet to see that decline over that period of time, to show that we are making strides and that we are putting in place, through an action plan, a defined action plan, these things, given time, given the investment, will work. And therefore, you know, we can say we are on this journey, and I think it's a realistic timescale as well. 2025 feels like a really realistic timescale. Sorry, 20. Did I just say that? But anyway, thanks, Simon. I think this is a great report, great step forward.
Finance portfolio holder getting muddled up with numbers. There's a worry. Councillor Wilson, then Councillor Sutton.
Thank you. Thank you for the report. I think it's clear how enthusiastic you are and how exciting this actually is. And I see that there's no obstruction whatsoever to achieving net zero by 2050, hopefully. I do think, in my portfolio at least, there is some low-hanging fruit that we can gather. You know, as the leader has said, things in local community groups, litter picking, and other initiatives, planting trees and so on. But also things like our assets, like our libraries, reducing the energy costs there, and looking at the lighting there, and as well as everywhere else in our estate. But also some of the larger projects as well. So some of the countryside estate work that we're doing is really, really positive. Things like renewable and low energy features, biomass boilers, making the fleet service a bit greener, educating people, educating children is really important. Looking at how we sort of reduce wildfires and how we reduce damage post-storms and extreme heat. There's a lot of stuff going on in the countryside estate, which is really, really positive. But I just wanted to highlight those few things and say that I'm grateful for this really, really positive report. It's a great example to others, both within the county and outside. So thank you.
Councillor Sutton, Councillor Price.
So, Councillor Tagg, thank you very much for bringing this. Don't want to reiterate a lot of what other people have said. A couple of points I wanted to make. It's great to see that we are looking at this from a realistic and achievable perspective, and not trying to do something that we would never achieve. So that's really good. And then the second point is, I'd just like to encourage members across the county to perhaps look at their Climate Change Action Fund and look particularly sympathetic towards bids and applications that involve children and young people, so that we get children and young people, our future, involved in this, and they get an understanding of it going forward. Thank you.
Councillor Price.
Yeah, thank you, Leader. And I just wanted to thank Councillor Tagg and officers for the huge amount of work that's been done behind the scenes to pull this document together and to highlight some of the work that's being done. I myself am the climate change portfolio holder over at Stafford Borough Council, as there are other boroughs and districts within the county who then sit on the sustainability board, which Councillor Tagg has set up, and that's an extremely useful meeting where we bring all of climate change portfolio holders together so that we have proper collaborative working across the county, and I think that's really important. Simon will remind me, of course, that my portfolio at Staffordshire County Council is one of those higher polluters, and that's around the home to school transport. Because of this, obviously, the 2050 timeline is a more realistic timeline, and an example of that would be around introducing standard requirements for Euro 5s with all of our home to school transport contracts. This is very expensive for our contractors and does take time to implement, and this additional time, or the 2050 time scale, allows us to move our home to school transport fleet towards that. We also have a working group set up which is looking at home to school transport and send transport in particular, where we will also be evaluating the ability to develop an app to make sure that all the seats are fully utilised within or on all of our transport, so that none is wasted, and that any journeys or particular routes which aren't being properly utilised, we make sure they're streamlined so we can reduce the amount of vehicles on the road and therefore reduce our CO2 emissions. And that work at the moment is continuing. Thank you.
Councillor Tagg, sum up and give us the recommendations. There's quite a lot people have come back to you with.
Thank you, Leader. Yes, thank you for the comments, and I think I will pass on those comments if our climate change team aren't watching this, which I'm sure they will be. We will also verbally pass it on, myself and Darryl, because they are obviously working with the staff and the officers in each of the council's areas of operation to ensure we meet our plan. I think what you said, Leader, and also what Mr. Parry said about nailing it down, nailing those we've got, banking those carbon emissions we've saved, that 43%, and that we have a plan to go forward. And there will be some, it won't be as fast as we want to sometimes because we're waiting for new technology to come along, we're waiting for other things to change legislation-wise from the government on planning, for example, but we will get there, and we have a plan to get there. And I think that leadership Mr. Parry talked about is key to bring the rest of the county along with us, and that as Councillor Price has said, there are enthusiastic cabinet portfolio holders across the county, bringing them all together with their officers, because there are enthusiastic climate change officers across the county, into a team that can work together. We can help each other, we can help to achieve where we want to go, and also help other organisations, whether that's businesses in other sectors, whether that's the health service, whether that's our communities, to reach that net zero target which we want. The comments by Paul are relevant with the local plan and the local plans, and the idea is to try and harmonise those across the county, and a stream of the Leaders Board work, which you chair, Leader, and which I think has been led by the Leader of East Staffs, is to look at harmonising those local plans, and the key part of that will be that commitment to net zero in the new bills particularly, which we need. So thank you for the comments. I'll move the recommendations, which are: A, we note the Council's Climate Change 2022 annual report, which records the positive progress that has been made on our target to become a net carbon zero council by 2050. B, approve the Climate Change Action Plan Revision 2 November 2022, which lists our key climate change mitigating actions over the next 3 years. And C, agree with the Corporate Scrutiny Committee and Scrutiny members' view that the report should be circulated to key Staffordshire stakeholders, including MPs, district and borough councils and our parish councils. I'll move those recommendations, Leader.
You've heard the recommendations. All those in favour? Thank you. We move on to agenda item number 8, which is the half-yearly Treasury Management Report for the period ended 30th of September 2022. Before Councillor Parry starts on this, we are constantly reminded in the financial sector of the risks exposed to investing in certain sorts of investments. The collapse of FTX, the Bitcoin trading platform, the virtual trading platform, this last week just gone, just highlights the need for this report every 6 months. And so, whilst it is heavily detailed, it is an important report, because we can invest our money in all sorts of places, but we need to make sure we get our money back, not just get it invested for high returns. So with that, Councillor Parry, and just reminding ourselves of how important this report is, over to you.
Thank you, Leader. And it's good to remind ourselves, actually, the real reason why we receive these reports is on the history, if you like, of Treasury management and the volatility of markets and the risks, unreasonable risks that were at one time taken. And we all remember, I think, the Icelandic banks collapse and other financial sector collapses, which left a number of councils with holes in their budgets, in their cash reserves. We've always taken a view of security and liquidity more important than return, and continue to have that approach. But I think treasury management just got interesting for all the wrong reasons. And clearly we're seeing at the moment, tomorrow, a fiscal event and probably a bringing together of fiscal and monetary policy to actually bear down on inflation, which is the kind of the dragon that we're all trying to slay, I guess, as the caustic influence in the economy that needs to be addressed. And we're seeing slowdown as we are across probably Western Europe of economies due to inflation and due to other economic factors, not least of all, of course, interest rates. Expecting a slowdown further, I guess, in the economy through monetary policy to actually stem that rise in inflation. So, in a sense, that's our operating environment. That's where we are. And in terms of the County Council's treasury management, our long-term borrowing and the effects of interest rates. The Treasury Management Report for 2023 stated that we use internal resources in lieu of borrowing. That's been a strategy that we've had around for some years now, and we've continued to follow that as long as the bank rate remains lower than borrowing, and cash reserves, if you like, are sufficient to allow us to do that. So this option remains the cheapest way to finance our capital expenditure, and we continue to do that and have made significant savings on taking that strategy in the past, and we will continue to do that in the future. So long-term borrowing rates for the council, which is linked to gilts, has risen as government borrowing becomes more expensive, and we saw the shock in the sense to gilts in the last few, feels like months away, but it's probably weeks away. And in line with increases in the base rate, the Public Works Loan Board borrowing rates have also risen. We've reported that in paragraph 22 of the report. The situation outlined, the council should avoid new loans unless needed, as we have the cash reserves to allow us to do that and carry on investing from our own reserves rather than borrowing from PWLB. Loan restructuring for the County Council. Loan restructuring repayment has not been financially viable at the moment, but as interest rates start to rise, this might be something that we will need to come back to, and we'll need to explore whether that is advantageous economically for the County Council to actually reschedule or repay loans as interest rates rise. Investments, in terms of what do we do with our working cash that's not used for funding capital but is left on deposit. All investments are compliant with the annual investment strategy. That's outlined in Appendix 4. The Treasury Management Panel also meet monthly to review Treasury activity. The main objective, obviously, is to invest securely. The Council uses money market funds, government deposits, long-term investments with high-quality banks, which are properly rated. There is no investment, therefore, in non-core type of investment vehicles. A list of investments the County Council held at the end of September are shown in the report, paragraph 36. This stood at 413 million. The Council earned 1.3% on its investments in the first half of the year, which fell to 1.1% when long-term investments are removed, reflecting the uncertainty and validity in the current marketplace, but still outperformed the benchmark for that period. The Council has one non-treasury investment, which is 49% in Entrust with current nil value. And finally, the prudential indicators for the first half of 2022-23 are shown in Appendix 2, and I have a recommendation for you on that. Variable interest rates which were exceeded due to the additional funding outlined in paragraph 49 were reasons why this indicator needs to be increased and are laid out with approval in the recommendations that I'm about to read to you, Leader, unless there are questions.
There are no questions. I can't believe there are no questions, Councillor Parry. It was beautifully presented, stylish, with panache.
Eloquent.
But eloquent.
Remembered all the numbers.
Yeah. My observation is the size of the numbers. I mean, these are big numbers you deal with. And the challenge, particularly for the actuaries as well, with all sorts of things moving simultaneously, gilt yields, life expectancy, and a whole range of factors which don't necessarily feed directly into this, but also have a feature in the expectation we get of getting our money back and the money we may need to borrow to invest in services that are required by people who need our help. It all feeds into this, and so it paints a very complicated picture, and thank you for presenting a very clear exposition of the challenges faced in Treasury management and reminding us why we need to keep a very close eye on this. So that would be my comment before you go to the recommendations.
Thank you. And we are, under County Treasurer's leadership, Rob Salmon's leadership, fortunate to have a very good, very strong Treasury management team and external advisors. So I think we are well in a good position to maintain that sort of security and stability and good advice. So I will move to the recommendations, Leader, which is recommendation 1. The Cabinet note the Treasury report, activities for the half year ended the 30th of September 2022. 2, that the Cabinet note the prudential indicators shown in Appendix 2 of the report and approve the increase to the upper limit of variable interest rates exposure from 316 million to 420 million as detailed in this report. And 3, that the Cabinet note and approve the proposed revision to the non-standard investments limits to 100 million per asset class and 200 million in total as laid out in this report and detailed in Appendix 5. I move.
All those in favour?
Agreed.
And for the record, that is unanimous. Thank you, Councillor Parry. Moving on then to agenda item number 9, and unusually for agenda item number 9, I'm just going to ask the Cabinet member to say a few words on this because it is a really good news story. So there are 2 items here, both from the Cabinet member for Children and Young People, Councillor Sutton, in approving the proposed expenditure volumes and delivery arrangements for the Household Support Fund, Education Support Fund in Staffordshire, which is required to be fully spent by the 31st of March 2023. And secondly, in approving the proposed expenditure volumes and delivery arrangements for the Household Support Fund in Staffordshire, along with approving the contracts extensions with the Beat the Cold and Community Foundation of Staffordshire on existing terms. Councillor Sutton, would you mind saying a few words on these 2 issues?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you very much, Leader. And I'll deal with the 2 things together because they both come from the £5.5 million that the County Council has been allocated by central government under the household support proposals to run until the end of this financial year. And the first bit about the Educational Support Fund, that is where we are allocating £20 e-vouchers to the families of every child that's entitled to free school meals. One for the October half term, which is obviously passed, one for the Christmas period, and one for February half term. And that's a total there of 1.5 million being allocated to that. And and helping and assisting some of the most vulnerable families within Staffordshire, and that's for every child that goes to attends a Staffordshire school entitled to free school meals. The second part is where we've allocated 1.2 million from a professional referral route, and this will see. Scheme will see eligible people benefit from a £65 per household voucher as well, and that would be and that scheme would be where people have been identified from everybody from county councillors through district and boroughs, health, citizens' advice, and across the board can refer into that, and again helping some of the most vulnerable people within Staffordshire. Thirdly, we've allocated 45,000, and that's £100, well, two £50 vouchers, but £100 obviously in total for the 450 people, for 450 children who have left our care that we still have a responsibility to support. We've allocated 600,000 to a slow cooker scheme, and this will provide over 20,000 people across Staffordshire the benefit of a slow cooker, and we'll be working with registered social landlords to identify the people that will be eligible to this. And finally, but in no way least, 1.5 million to Beat the Cold Community Foundation, and this will provide either a top-up credit card for those on prepayment meters, or a credit paid directly to the energy supplier for those on meters account, and that is there, and that is managed through the Winter Warmth project that we have been supporting. So overall, all those schemes will help to support 55,000 people across Staffordshire, who benefit from financial assistance through those vouchers, fuel bill payments, or the slow cookers.
Absolutely excellent, helping people with the cost of living at a time that they need it. So thank you very much indeed for that additional information around those delegated decisions. Moving on to agenda item number 10, which is the forward plan of key decisions. First of all, in December in public, we've got the Strategic Plan and Medium-Term Financial Strategy 2023 to 2028, brought to you by the Cabinet Member for Finance and Resources, Councillor Parry. Delivering a future vision for the countryside estate, brought to you by the Cabinet Member for Communities and Culture, Councillor Wilson. Homes for Ukraine, brought to you by the Cabinet Member for Communities and Culture, Councillor Wilson. Adult Learning Disability Provider Services, brought to you by the Cabinet Member for Health and Care, Councillor Jessel. Review of older people's nursing home capacity and demand, brought to you by the Cabinet Member for Health and Care, Councillor Jessel. Framework Agreement, Tarmac, brought to you by the Cabinet Member. Every month, just almost quivering in excitement about those reports. Brought to you by the Cabinet Member for Commercial Matters, Councillor DeVille. Again in December, wait for it, Framework Agreement Furniture, brought to you by the Cabinet Member for Commercial Matters. I do this slightly light-heartedly, but the numbers involved in this are huge. Numbers, huge amounts of money that we spend on tarmac and furniture. So it is an important report, but it's just the excitement of the title, Councillor Div. I think that's the thing I'm slightly lost with. Again in December, still in public, Staffordshire County Council Local Flood Risk Management Strategy, brought to you by the Cabinet Member for Environment, Infrastructure and Climate Change. That might be very timely, I suspect, in December, Councillor Tagg. Then moving into private, we've got the strategy for the future commissioning and contracting for extra care housing within Staffordshire, brought to you by the Cabinet Member for Health and Care, Councillor Jessel. Moving into January into public and testing to the limit the theory that you can't get enough of a good thing, we've got the Strategic Plan and Medium-Term Financial Strategy 2023 to 2028, brought to you again by the Cabinet Member for Finance and Resources, Councillor Parry. Staffordshire Sustainability Board Communications Plan 2023, brought to you by the Cabinet Member for Environment, Infrastructure and Climate Change, Councillor Tagg. Future Highways Delivery Model, brought to you by the Cabinet Member for Highways and Transport, Councillor Williams. Staffordshire County Council's Electric Vehicle Charging Infrastructure Strategy, brought to you by the Cabinet Member for Highways and Transport, Councillor Williams. And then moving into February in public, Integrated Performance Report Quarter 3, 2022-2023, brought to you by the Cabinet Member for Finance and Resources, Councillor Parry and myself. And then Our People Strategy 2023 and beyond, brought to you by myself. Again in March, the Capital Programme for Schools 2023-2024, brought to you by the Cabinet Member for Education and SEND, Councillor Price, and that concludes the forward plan. Ladies and gentlemen, there is no need to exclude the public on agenda item 11. Therefore, at this point, the meeting is closed. Thank you very much.